Hey guys, welcome to the CoLab podcast. My name is Ryan Macpherson, CEO at Coassemble, the online training platform revolutionizing how teams train. We have some exciting stuff to cover with Elliot Begoun. Today we're talking about how TIG Brands uses empathy to guide businesses and what role online training played with their growth in 2020. Let's dive in, shall we? Welcome, Elliot, to the CoLab podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Ryan. Glad to be here.
Awesome. I'm going to run through some questions today around TIG Brands and how you use empathy. And I'm curious, where does that start? Where does that empathy idea and all that, where does that stem from?
Well, from a few things. First of all, brands, the way consumers interact with brands is emotional. We don't buy things because it's the rational thing to do. We buy things emotively. Mm-hmm. And at the center point of human-centered design is this concept of empathy. And the best marketers, the best brands are able to put themselves into the shoes of their consumers. They can look through the lens of those that they're trying to serve and leverage that understanding to build a sticky relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense. And we often think about it from our side around the learner. We're an online training company, and one of our biggest audiences is the person who's going to go through the knowledge sharing or the online training, and we have to put ourselves in their shoes and think about that experience. So that makes a lot of sense. Talk to us about how TIG Brands got started and what you guys are all about and what you do to help the community out there in this space.
Yeah, I came to TIG and started the company almost 8 years ago after a long career in CPG, always wanting to kind of sow my entrepreneurial oats. Mm-hmm. And when it finally came time to leave the kind of comfort of corporate life, I recognized that maybe the best entrepreneur I could be would be to come alongside those aspiring entrepreneurs and help them avoid all of the mistakes and the things that I had amassed over my career. And the intent was originally to be more of a traditional consultant. And then I quickly realized that I was a terrible consultant because I couldn't just stand on the sideline and advise. I wanted to
roll up the sleeves.
Yeah, roll up the sleeves and dig in. And going back to empathy, I was actually at a retreat at Stanford's design school, which is design thinking school, which mm-hmm. empathy is kind of, again, the cornerstone of that process. Okay. I was looking at tech accelerators and noticing that many of those same models were being replicated in the consumer packaged goods world. Okay. And felt like that was, although beneficial, was somewhat flawed because especially in our space and natural products, it's a very different relationship that consumers have between products they're putting in and on their bodies than with tech. Mm-hmm. And so we started developing a one-to-one customized accelerator program to help these early stage brands, and did it by putting a group together of founders and using them to help us model and shape the program. And so we've been running that now for about 7 years.
Congratulations. Sounds like an amazing program. I'm curious, when you're first jumping off the cliff, as I say, to entrepreneurship, or you're starting a business, there's a lot of questions, a lot of fears, a lot of excitement at the same time. When you were first entering, what was that like for you, and what did it look like in those early days? Now 7 years on, you've worked with many brands, but I'm curious on that first experience. What was that like, and what did that feel like as an entrepreneur jumping into that first experience?
Terrifying. Really was terrifying and filled with doubt and at the time I did it, on paper, probably the worst time to do it. At that time we had 2 kids in college and 1 in high school, and I was leaving a pretty comfortable position in corporate life, but I was just so miserable. And my wife was the one who called me on it, and she just said, I'm tired of you faking it and trying to drag yourself up every day and put a good game face on and go to the office and be miserable. And so it's time to start. And when I started there, I felt that heavy burden of having to still provide, and we laugh about it now, but I remember vividly that I was worried about every dollar we would spend and everything that was going on, and my wife was going about her life like nothing changed.
Nothing had changed.
and I kept saying, could you please have some doubt, just have some doubt, so that I'm not alone. Yeah, but
very much a lot of confidence to start. Yeah.
Now I look back and I tell this, it's really interesting. My two older kids, I gave them the speech of, you go to university and you graduate and you get a good job. And my youngest son, I'm like, dude, take a year off, start a business. I recognize now that real security and real freedom comes from being an entrepreneur. Because you're not beholden to anybody, and you don't wind up just being a cog in the wheel.
Yeah, great terms. I noticed on your bio, so I was looking at your website earlier, and I was looking through some of the brands that you've worked with. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about that in a minute. But I know you said you're a lifelong learner, and you constantly like to challenge yourself and learn. Is that part of your makeup, and probably part of the brands that you work with now? Obviously, those one-on-one sessions is, being an entrepreneur. As myself, started a business 4 years ago. Co-Assemble today has 30 plus people. It was kind of 4 when I first started with my co-founder Jude, but the change and the challenging and the ongoing learning every single day, every single week, and every single month in the type of business like ours and like many others is ongoing. So I noticed that you love that lifelong learning, and I'm curious to hear a little bit about where that come from, and how do you instill that with the brands that you work with?
Yeah, and I do. I mean, I think for one thing, it helps keep me young. I think there's a huge risk to anybody who thinks they've reached some point in their life where they know more than they don't know. I know for sure that I know a lot less than what I know, and that to me is exciting. Yep. I mean, I think when I first started this, I came into it maybe with the mindset that I was somewhat a misplaced university professor and wanted to be a teacher. That was actually when I was an undergrad, going to grad school. That was what my path was in my mind, that I was going to be a professor. So I always loved the concept of teaching. What I didn't realize was how much time I'd be spending also as a student, and being able to do both, being able to be both teacher and student every day simultaneously is one of the coolest things in the world. I feel like sometimes I get to just cross-pollinate. So
no, I couldn't agree more. I've got a very young, talented team that teach me something new almost every minute of the day, and at the same time, I hope that I'm able to impart some sort of wisdom or knowledge onto those guys at the same time. So I think when I think about running a business or leading a business, I talk about 70% of my job and what I do day to day is coaching, mentoring, and nudging, and kind of supporting and making people make great decisions and have the autonomy and trust to move. Is that similar to how you see kind of that one-on-one session with your brands and how you grow that? They're doing their business every day, they're in it, they know their parts of the model, but it's really about kind of coaching them and mentoring through that process, understanding their challenges and giving them opportunities at the same time. Is that part of the model for you guys at TIG Brands?
Absolutely. I mean, the way we refer to ourselves as stakeholders, because we're coming alongside them, and we have the ability, I have the ability in our team, to share our knowledge and to share, but also simultaneously gain their knowledge. And I believe in the collective wisdom. So the way we approach it is not, here's what we don't preach or tell them here's what we're going to do. It's the opposite. Where do you want to be? And let's work together to chart the best path there, using what we know and what you know and what we both have to go learn, together. But a big part of that is also support. I mean, one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that it can be isolating. It can be, you're living with it, 24/7. You're living with your doubts and your fears, and so a big part of what we're doing is just letting other founders know that they're not alone in that's very normal, and let's not let it paralyze you. let's use it to move the business forward.
Yeah, and I love that analogy of sort of sidling up next to the person. And I think when we think about online training, or I know when I talk to people about online training, for far too long it was a forced information fed process. It was kind of like, hey, here's my information, I want you to consume it, and I've just planned a perfect way for you to do so. And what I saw in the early days in some of my experiences where we wouldn't get the engaging results that we were looking for, it was often due to that, we're trying to force something, or we're the experts, we're going to tell you the next step. And I think where online training often does work in parallel to what you're talking about in your program is where the actual content and the idea sidles up against the person's real day experiences, the things that they're actually doing every day. They understand the context, and this information just helps them grow. It doesn't necessarily force an idea down their throat or tell them something that they already know, for example. So I think sometimes when we think about online training or just education in itself, it's about sidling up and making sure there's a good match and a good fit for that information as that person's going through that experience.
Yeah, I think you said a few really insightful things I couldn't agree with more. I mean, first of all, that aspect is really rolls back to empathy. It's understanding who you're trying to teach or who you're trying to help, educate. But the other, and a really important part of my thought process as we added the e-learning component to our offering was that I needed it to be interactive. It needed to be a two-way exchange of information, not a push down one way. I mean,
100%.
God forbid somebody spend hours, listening to me just lecture or talk. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. All they need to do is ask my kids what that was like when they were younger. It really is about trying to, to me, especially in today's business world, the real learning comes from when you're exchanging information and learning from one another, not one-way learning. And so a big part of why we waited a while to do this was my fear that I wouldn't find a means or a platform that would allow for that. And it took some thought to figure that out.
And I want to come back to the empathy point just for a second. If you could give us an example of, in TIG Brands, when you're working with a brand, and you mentioned it's often consumer products. So, it's a soap that I'm going to put on my skin that I care about how it's been manufactured or come to fruition, for example, and finding an understanding of who that purchaser is and I assume what that market is looking for. That's where that empathy component really comes down to understanding the person. And we have a learner first approach here at Coassemble. We always talk about the learner first and not the actual creator of the content, even though, in your case, you're the purchaser, you're the one that's going to buy our platform, for example, and you're going to create the content and really help that person along. We actually think about the first person in that exchange is actually the learner, the person that's going to go through that course and consume that knowledge or have that interaction. So if you can give us a good example at TIG Brands, how does this empathy kind of fold out as a where's the rubber hit the ground for this idea inside TIG Brands?
Well, I mean, it's pretty much endemic in everything that we do. It's how we approach our brands. It's how our brands approach their consumers.
Okay.
And ultimately, it's how people make decisions. But I'll give you two examples. I'll give you the two marketing examples. One with the absence of empathy and one with empathy, and they're both in the business that I'm not involved with. But I just think, given where we are right now, everyone listening can relate to it, and that's around the travel industry. So I got one email from an airline, not long after the pandemic, and of course here in the United States, we're still crippled by it for a myriad of very aggravating reasons, but it's still very palpable in our lives. And it was not too long after we were on complete shutdown. It was from an airline who was just touting great getaways for next summer, and now's the time to book your getaways. And my thought when I received that is not at all what I'm thinking. That is not
contextually relevant.
In fact, the last thing I'm thinking about is just completely not empathetic. And then another one came from an airline that I flew fairly often, and then said, listen, we don't want you to worry about travel. We know, you've been a great customer, and so we're going to protect your status. We're going to make sure that we hold your status as is for the next 2 years. So
Yep.
no worries. We're here when the world allows us to be here. Completely empathetic, because if I thought at all about, travel or my relationship with the airline I fly on, the one thing that I would think about as a regular travel would be, just that. So I think it's how you show up for another one that's been big here is around what's going on with racial tension and
Yes.
and how brands choose to show up and be there. So it's now is a very important time to think, as you mentioned, learner first, consumer first. I mean, ultimately everyone in the value chain is trying to serve the same constituency, and what is it that we're solving for them? How are we making their life better? Those are the questions we need to ask and answer first.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I think from an example from my side, I think we early on chose, and I was a big fan of talking to our customers, and early on we chose to have live support, so 24/7 kind of live chat inside the platform to assist people go through this journey, because we're very much in a market where someone's going to come in and it might be their first experience in creating online training. We'll talk about that today with you, but it might be that first jump off the cliff and say, hey, this is something new for me and I need a little bit of support. And as we did that, what I found was having that conversation was an ongoing process for us to learn both on how to better support our customers and hopefully be empathetic to what their needs were, but also for them to to find out about us and understand what our journey was and our mission and how we were, going to try and help that. And, we have a very excellent retention rate. So we look at, growth and retention as any business would. And, we really focus in on that retention rate because we feel like customers who will come and have a great experience, utilizing our platform to create their training for their businesses. There's two audiences there. There's the audience, the person who's creating that content. They should have a great experience and feel like they're well supported. But there's also their consumers, the learners, and what they're feeling about this process. And we love to hear that people have enjoyed their courses, or they had fun while they're doing them, or they've learned something completely new. And if we've been able to empower that, then that's great. So that two-way conversation for us, very, very important in the process of understanding our customers. Let's dive into a couple of questions around your journey into what I'd call online training or online education. So I'm curious, what's the aha moment that says to you, you said you kind of held off for a while on choosing to dive into online training. What was the aha moment originally before you chose, Coassemble, move forward? What was the aha moment for you to get moving onto this? How did it form in your business? What was the power it was going to deliver? Where did you start out thinking this could be something that I could really add value to my businesses?
I think they were two ahas with about 1.5 or 2 years in between them.
Okay, cool.
The first one was this concept of challenging ourselves, trying to figure out how can we serve one to many? How can we, the need state, we're application based for our one-to-one program, and we're full most of the time. And so how do we help more brands? And because I really believe in general, just a bit of my own personal philosophy, that commerce is the greatest changing agent. If we're really going to take on some of the more complex problems that we face as a world, and then it's going to be the economic powerhouses, the entrepreneurs, the innovators that are going to drive that change, and I want to support. So that was the first kind of, how do we start thinking about serving one to many and
scaling
our impact and scaling our reach. And then I just put it on the back burner because I just didn't have enough bandwidth, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And then when in March, the largest in our industry, one of the largest trade show events happens right then, and it actually was canceled as we were walking into the center for COVID. They shut it down, and there was a lot of panic by founders. And what do we do? This was a great place. There's a business school attached to it, that I would teach at. So there was this concern about, what are we going to do? How are we going to navigate this? And that was the moment that I committed to bringing this to light and prioritizing it. And
Mm-hmm.
true to form, like so many entrepreneurs, I literally did. I mean, I had purchased CoAssemble through AppSumo and
Mm-hmm.
played around with it, really liked the platform, but other than that, had not done anything with it. It was just
Yep.
sitting there. And
Exploration, basically, just explore it,
yeah,
put
just
it
to
on a
try
bench.
to
Yep.
exactly begin to think through how I might. And what I wound up doing was, in true entrepreneurial fashion, is jumping off the cliff and building an airplane on the way down. What we did is we invited people to apply to our e-learning program,
Mm-hmm.
and we put a pretty arduous application out.
Okay.
And what we told them is that we would identify 10 brands and pick them out to be part of a pilot program.
Okay.
And I wanted to have a good cross section of brands in different life cycles and in different categories to make sure that whatever we put together content wise was applicable to
Mm-hmm.
many. And so we picked those 10 brands, and basically what we did is each week I would build out the modules, build out the course. They'd go through it. We'd do our interactive workshop, and then we'd have a focus group afterwards to go through all the content, all the stuff. They'd give us all their feedback. I'd go back and make all the adjustments, tweak, improvements based on their feedback from last week's course,
Mm-hmm.
and build the next week's course.
Build the next one. Very smart.
We did that for we did 8 courses. We did them. Ideally, our initial thought was we do one a week when the program was live, but for this purpose, we did it every 2 weeks, so I had time to build and adjust and so forth. And by the time they had finished all 8, we had a program that was very much shaped by them and
tested,
and worked it out, and then from there began to open it up to regular students.
I love that concept, and we often talk to businesses about part of this journey of it's not just getting a course up and then hoping that it resonates. And I love the fact that you had those focus groups, and it was a blended approach. So it was like, let's go through the content, but let's also learn from our audience on exactly what we can adjust to make this more powerful, more insightful, more contextually relevant. So I love that. And when we talk to businesses, there is this initial thought in online training. It's where like, okay, so if I get it up online, I'm done. Like we're here, we've got the presentation, and that means now I have online training. So I have uploaded my PowerPoint, and that was offline, and now I've got it online, and that means we're done, and we can just send this out via URL and hope for the best. And so I love hearing the fact that you really worked through the model and thought, okay, our first test or our first kind of almost audience test will be the actual courses. We'll build them contextually at a time that matters. And we often talk about, businesses use our tool often on a Monday, they have a problem, they build on a Tuesday, and by Friday, they can have an insightful understanding about what that information is doing inside the business. So we love that, what we call micro learning or, rapid learning, to be able to kind of create content and then use it to better build in the future. So yeah, love that concept. Can I go back before you started with CoAssemble and say, the period before, you're obviously an organization that shares a lot of knowledge and does so with that lens of empathy and works one-on-one with businesses. Education is probably a very core part of your business. What did it look like before CoAssemble? So I understand how you got here. What did it look like before? Was it face-to-face sessions? Was it webinars? Like what was your process to get information out to your audience and then kind of do the same thing and work with them on those concepts?
Yeah, I mean, what we did prior, and what we still do, and is our customized accelerator is really primarily delivered like this over Zoom, because our brands are from all over the world. But we are very deeply involved in the business on a regular day in, day out basis. So it is a instead of it being one-to-one or one-to-many, it's one-to-one, and we're very limited in how that can grow. And we're stakeholders for most of those brands. We have an equity relationship with many of them.
Yep.
And we're deeply involved. But two things I recognized was one is, again, that limited our ability to help, and that what we would see is a lot of brands would come to us after making some really expensive mistakes and
Mm.
making decisions, that we'd spend a lot of our time just trying to unwind.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are also many that never would come to our program. They weren't a fit or so forth, but could have been very much helped by, some core understanding and some
Yep.
foundation before going out there, because it's hard enough as it is, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was really the thinking. And then lastly, I've worked through with a business coach throughout the entire time I've been doing this, and it was a challenge that they set to me. Is like, you've got to think about another product and a way to extend your business.
Yep.
If you don't want to be so tethered to it,
Mm-hmm.
day in and day out, which was a goal of mine. We want to be able to work from anywhere, which we can do now, but also catch our breath a bit.
Yep.
And so making it less about my actual physical time and being able to deposit some of that time in a bank, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that we're really a good e-learning platform is well suited for. We can drive you to that, and that's deposited in the bank. I only have to go through it, or my team only has to teach it, a couple of times, and then it's there. And then when you come to us, you've already got that knowledge. And so that's really, why. And one of the things I want to go back to is, you mentioned about this kind of concept that so many people think about, I'm going to get this done and it's done. I'm going to get my online course. I think I thought about that at first and was really worried about all the video content and everything being perfect. And what I realized, for us at least, two things. One is that viewing it as a living, breathing organism that's always changing, and we're adding new content is
Love that.
is really, it brings more life to the program, and it keeps it relevant. And then the second thing is that keeping it informal, keeping it feeling more approachable,
Organic,
and so forth. We get a lot of positive feedback because of that, versus something that they feel is highly produced or not. And so, and then the other thing is, because of the way the platform is, we're able to put things in that they can take with them. So, some of it might be articles, some of it might be, here's a video, but here it is in podcast form, and it's a link to a podcast that they can take on their walk or do whatever, or, use the sounds of my velvety voice to put them to bed, whatever they want to do. We try to make it fit into their lives.
Yeah, I love that. And so a big part of, one of the reasons that one of our missions at Coassemble is to really kind of drive what we call tribal knowledge sharing. So really capturing what a business has, and then, making it not necessarily this perfect product that goes out the door, but more something that can be revisited, constantly kind of interacted with, but also it hits the person at the right time. So it's so important that online training is thought about as not just the content, but the scheduling. How do I actually get this to the person? When is it going to matter for them in their role or in their business? And in your case, as a founder myself and as an entrepreneur, I'm pretty busy. So when I get content that I want to consume, it might be late at night, for example, that I need to kind of lay in bed and wind the day down with some thoughts on, how Intercom's doing their marketing, or, I'm always kind of researching exactly how I can better our business. And so online training, it feels like for a lot of businesses, gives you this, it's almost like another content type, right? So podcasts, blogs, this is becoming another content type that can really engage someone, educate at the same time, but also give you some insight as well. And I'll talk about it, the analytics side, and if that's important to your business, but give you some insight into what's resonating, what isn't resonating, and what's really working with your audiences. And, if you don't have that knowledge, it's hard to create content that will really move the needle or really have an impact for that person. So I'm keen to touch on that. What is the side of the platform, and the learning process for you around analytics? Do you really delve in? Is it not something that you're really utilizing yet? I'm just keen to know about that side of the process.
Yeah, that's actually something we're not utilizing yet. As the program begins to ramp up, I see us doing just that, and trying to make sure that we are. But the one thing we do use fairly regularly is just is looking at learner reports and seeing how they're progressing. And again, we really want them to feel like this is not something that they're doing, on their own. And so we have a community manager who will, reach out and check in on how they're doing. And, when they turn in an assignment, we're always making comments on the assignment. So there's
Giving a lot of feedback.
we host virtual office hours every day so they can come in and ask,
awesome
questions. And so we wanted to make sure that although we were using the platform as a way to deliver it, we still created these touch points. And so that's where the data really helps us, because we're able to manage by exception. We can reach out to those that are seemingly, languishing and not going through as quickly, or stuck on certain things, and ask. Or sometimes we also look at those who are going really fast and wonder if they're really actually, applying what needs to be applied.
We 3 years ago, one of the things that I saw as a major challenge and a problem for businesses who are entering online training was keeping their voice, right? So a brand like yours, who has a great reputation, works with, really empowered individuals who are entrepreneurs that are moving their businesses forward. You've got a certain voice to what you're offering. And sometimes a lot of businesses can be scared about saying, if I go online, I'm going to lose that voice, or I'm going to, taint that reputation, or I'm going to open up something that gets out of control and I might not be able to handle it, for example. And one of the things we did 3 years ago was to open up live chat inside the platform between learner and creator, or learner and business, and learner and trainer, for example. And one of the reasons that I pushed so hard for that was, as a teacher back in the day, the voice in the classroom was a major part of why kids learn, right? So there's opportunities as they're going through their tasks, but it's the voice that goes over the desk and just says, hey, I can see you stuck on, number 5 there. Can I assist, if that makes sense? It's not necessarily that, just preaching from the front of the room. It's actually the voice that goes around and assists. And what I felt was missing in online training was the voice between the learner and the creator. And so we put in this kind of, like I talk about it as the 2 old cans with string in between, but it kind of connected the learner to say, hey, I'm actually going through this online training, and I know you've designed it in a great way and it's great, but I actually don't know what you mean here. and I'm keen to understand it. And it kind of opened up this dialogue between the online creator and also the learner, which allowed this dialogue to then help that person progress through online training, and that voice was never lost. And so I'm just curious, with the community building that you've done, and obviously the reach outs, it sounds like you're doing a very similar thing. You're trying to connect that learner to have a great experience on the learner side, but also be connected to the person that's creating the content and who owns the knowledge. And I'm keen to understand, is that a big part of how you're seeing online training in your business?
Yeah, that was a
long question. Sorry, that was a
but a very an important one. And yeah, that was to me kind of the absolute. That was the sacrifice, the trade-off I wasn't willing to make. Getting back to the word I used, kind of that interactivity, because I think, in my experience, and I don't necessarily have any data to back this up, but I think learners learn best when they know they're cared for, valued, and respected, and that they're not doing this alone. And so we very much do that. The other thing that we brought to it was a online community forum, so that they can post questions and talk to other people in the program routinely. And then we also teach a live interactive workshop once a week, so that they get face-to-face, through Zoom at least, face-to-face interaction with other founders, other entrepreneurs in the program. So
awesome. And earlier in the podcast, you mentioned that, this was part of also opening up a new product line. This was going to actually assist your business as well to assist other businesses. Do you see that online training, e-learning, the tools like us, CoAssemble, can really accelerate a business's product line? They can accelerate a community. They can build almost revenue and build out kind of part of their business. Is it that type of tool for you? Do you see other businesses being able to leverage this type of tool? Some of the businesses you work with, for example, do you see them being able to kind of capture their internal knowledge and then share that with their customers, or share that with their partners, or share that with their internal teams? I'm keen, now you've had this experience, do you really see this as a tool, a business tool, or do you still see it as a training tool?
No, I mean, I see it 1000% business tool, as
Yep.
a strategic lever, especially for any business that's in the service side, right?
Hmm.
Because I mean, we live in a knowledge economy,
Yep.
and I have, as an entrepreneur myself, my choice for growth would have been simply to add people
Yep.
and to build, to make a bigger impact. And to me, I mean, I know this sounds probably a bit hokey, but to me, making an impact right now at this stage of my career is probably, first and foremost to monetizing the impact being made. I mean, don't get
Yep.
me wrong, need to make money, but
Of course.
it's impact. And I think, I also didn't want it was very important for me to be able to grow the business, but not grow away from it, if that makes sense. So, when you
Excellent.
build a
Excellent.
business and the business gets bigger and bigger, you wind up spending most of your time running the business and not doing the really cool things that got you in the business in the first place. And so to me, adding, e-learning and online learning to this allowed me to do both, allowed me a path
Right.
to have a bigger impact and scale the business, but not pull me away from doing the part of the business that I love the most and spending my time running a complex organization. And I think any service company should really be thinking about how can they do that? How can they share their knowledge? And plus, it's a great incubator. It's a great place where, in this kind of business, again, in the knowledge-based economy, in the service business, so much of why a customer becomes a customer is because you've established trust.
Yep.
And so, online learning, e-learning really allows you to begin to build that trust relationship so that, they can take maybe the next step with you within your business and become a bigger part or a bigger, customer.
Yeah, one of the biggest pushes that we see at the moment is almost education is the new relationship selling, if that makes sense. And we see a lot of businesses utilizing our tool to share information on who they are and what their products lines are, and what they're doing, innovating in the newest kind of space. And they're utilizing our tool to impart that education out to mass audiences or one-on-one, or and even our sales team, who are awesome, and they build amazing relationships with our customers. Hopefully you've had that experience, but they use our tool to send out a quick URL, mini course on who they are and what the demo may include and what our product values are and what our vision is. And it really does help, kind of bridge that gap that, for example, coming onto a cold demo or, coming onto a product where you don't necessarily know too much. It just bridges that initial gap. And we find that very, very powerful. So good to hear that you're seeing that value as well. My last question for you, what does the future look like now with online training in your business, or an online tool that you can disseminate knowledge? You've gone a long way in a very short amount of time to kind of get up that program, that pilot program, and I love the way you put that together. What does the next iteration? Is there something new coming out? Is there something you're thinking about utilizing the tool for, or is it doubling down on what you've already got today and just making that a better process? I'm keen to know, what does the future look like now you've got this tool in your business?
Yeah, well, I in our growth projections, it becomes a bigger and bigger part of our revenue stream.
Okay.
For sure, because again, I think to the earlier point, it's another form of content delivery, and it's a very unobtrusive way for many to do it. I mean, as a lot of entrepreneurs, many of them don't give up their day jobs when they first start, and they're trying to fit things into a busy, crazy life, or their heads down in their business all day. So having an unobtrusive way that fits into their lifestyle is great. We are talking already about, what are we missing? What do we need to add? And can we add some one-off courses or things like that at times, especially as there's, trend development. And then we're trying to invite more folks in as guest lecturers and doing things
I love that.
along that line. So it's going to be a continued and bigger overall part of our business. I think our projections have it eclipsing 50% of our revenue in the next 2 years. So yeah,
that's exciting. Yeah, I mean, it's a transformation. I think if you talk to most people, they look at it as an LMS or a training tool as the stuffy courses that someone sends out every 6 months that you have to kind of sit in front of, and you're a bit bored and it's not that much fun. But I think what we're seeing in the market and what we're seeing with brands like TIG Brands today with yourself, and is really utilizing the tool as a knowledge sharing platform that can actually drive not only knowledge to your external parties, but drive your own business and drive those in processes, and really see it as a business tool like the CRMs and every other business tool that you've got in technology wise in your business. You're now seeing that as another way to drive that engagement in your customer. And I think we talk about massively at Co-Assemble that, talking to our customers, engaging with our customers, the only way that we really survive as a brand and build as a bigger brand is by engaging those customers in our product, and doing so in a way that feels supportive and fun and light, and hopefully a little bit of color as well as we go through. But it's great to hear you're thinking along the same lines, and it's really going to be a part of your business moving forward.
Well, and one of the things I really appreciate about it is that, and you said it earlier, is that we're able to deliver it in a way that's true to our brand. It's true to our voice, right? We don't show up any differently for those who come through our online as for those who come through one-to-one. We're still the same, still have a face for podcast, all of those kind of things, right? We're no different, and that's important. You don't want to be forced to have to show up differently by the ways that you deliver your information. And so it's an important element, and I agree with you that that's exactly how we look at it, as another best way to put another arrow in the quiver of how we are able to run and have the kind of impact I hope to have.
Well, congratulations on picking it up so quickly. I mean, I know that for those who don't know AppSumo, I think you mentioned before, we launched on AppSumo about a year and a half ago, I think it was, and we sold, I think, 3,500 accounts in 30 days, and at a very, very kind of low entry price. And our goal there and our aim was to just kind of open that up and see as many people come in and leverage the tool. So great to see that you were able to kind of take that opportunity and drive it into something bigger in your business. If you've got one message to our listeners, jumping into this process, some of the challenges, what would you say to someone that's just thinking about maybe bringing this into their business? They're thinking about some of the ideas that you talked about today, where you're sharing knowledge, you're sharing your own brand and making sure that fits. Is there something you'd leave our listeners with, on that journey, that first step, or, jumping off the cliff and building the plane as you go down, for example? What would you leave as a message?
Well, I mean, I would say, do it. I mean, that's the key, right? Is actually
just do it. Nike style.
Yeah. I mean, if you feel like there's an opportunity to deliver content in this way and to make a bigger impact, do it. And just view it as imperfect action. And that's one of the things that I not to shamelessly plug Co-Assemble, but I, really love about the product, is that I can go in there and build something and get it. And then I can go back and think a few days, oh man, I wish I'd done this differently, or I should add this, or and just be able to view it as this imperfect living organism that I'm always going back in and changing, or if I have an idea of a way to better communicate it, better teach it, or we have our own podcast. If I think there's a podcast episode that's important, or an article that we've written that is just to go in and drop it in and swap out, new for old, and
new for old,
change things around is keys. But I think the thing I'd recommend is do it and just embrace imperfect action. If your first courses are bumpy, and so what? It's better than what you had before. So
yeah, so we have a saying here. It's part of our values at Co-Assemble, which is think big, start small. And we talk about all the time. Not it's never going to be perfect. Something always grows and gets better. And let's get it out the door and get some users, get some customers telling us what we can improve. So I love that you've taken that approach to your training, and you can kind of get that value out of Co-Assemble. So thank you for your time. It's been amazing having you on the CoLab podcast. Really enjoyed hearing about your entrepreneurial spirit. It sounds like me as an entrepreneur as well could spend a bit of time with you and really get a lot out of it. And so maybe we'll meet offline after this and have a beer at some stage in the US. But thank you for your time today. For our listeners, I think takeaways from today is I love that organic ever changing approach that Elliots brought to his training, and always thinking about it's a living organism. It's going to change. I can add value to it. It needs to be current. It needs to be contextually relevant to the people that are going to do it. And it really sits next to what they're doing in their everyday businesses and what they're doing in their everyday lives, rather than trying to fit in at a time when it doesn't work for them. So I think amazing messages there. Great work, Elliot, and thank you for coming on the CoLab podcast. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and definitely I'd love to take this up offline a little bit more.